Today we'll talk about how to effectively overcome morning anxiety forever. Stick around. Welcome back. My name's Nina and I'm a life coach that specializes in personal development. Here at this channel we talk all about our emotional well-being, understanding our own psychology, and leading our best life possible. So if you aren't already a subscriber, go ahead and become one. We definitely want you to stay connected. I think we're all familiar with the experience of waking up with a feeling of dread in the morning or feeling very uneasy about the day ahead. Now, maybe it could be that we are anxious or worried about some specific situation, or it could be just kind of this free-floating anxiety that just makes us want to kind of hide underneath the covers. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that for many years I personally struggled with anxiety, and mornings, for whatever reason, were always the absolute worst. I absolutely hated feeling like I was almost afraid of the day or what was going to happen. It was just the worst feeling in the world. So I wanted to share today the different strategies that I found most helpful. We're going to talk about the things that we can do kind of the night before to prepare, and then what to do when we are actually experiencing this morning anxiety. So let's start by talking about the things that we can do to try to prevent morning anxiety from happening. What are the things that we can kind of do ahead of time? The first thing that we can do is to make sure that we get enough sleep. And I know that sounds difficult for a lot of people because of stressful lives, first of all, but also because anxiety tends to mess with our sleep cycle. So it's likely that if we suffer from anxiety, we also may suffer from some different sleep issues as well. But we want to at least attempt to get as much sleep as possible. And that starts by making sure that we really have large enough allowance of hours to get enough sleep. And we want to make sure the night before that we really start to wind ourselves down and start relaxing at the end of the evening to help us really shift into having that good night's sleep. We also want to try to get rid of any unresolved thoughts. So a lot of times we have difficulty getting to sleep because we are running through things that happen during our day, or we are kind of mentally making our to-do list for the next day. So we don't want to give ourselves kind of mental homework that we're going to try to do when we are falling asleep. We want to do this all before we go to bed. And that could be journaling, that could be making a to-do list, that could be just writing down how we are feeling that day and the things that we are thinking about. So we feel that we've kind of addressed all these thoughts before we go to bed. Another thing, believe it or not, is having a clean bedroom. This is something that I resisted for a long time because I was a very disorganized person, but something that I came to realize was actually extremely helpful. For most people, outer order really does contribute to inner calm. So just having that nice clear space to kind of relax in at the end of the day ends up being very, very helpful. And lastly, we want to think about any tasks that might stress us out the next day that we could potentially take care of in the evening. So for example, if it's really chaotic in the morning, you may want to set out your kids' clothes or your own clothes, or make your lunch for work, or take care of any paperwork that you might be leaving usually for the morning. All of these things, if we can do them in the evening, that can help us have a better morning that is filled with less anxiety. Because a lot of times anxiety simply just has to do with the fact that we feel like there are so many things to do, there are too many things to think about, and it all seems really overwhelming. So if we can really pare that down to just a few things that we need to accomplish in the morning, that's going to help out a lot as well. So these are just a few of the things that we can do to try to prevent anxiety in the morning. We can do all we can the night before to really set us up to have a good day. However, there still will be days that we may wake up feeling anxious. So when that happens, what can we do? So when I was suffering with morning anxiety, what would happen for me is I would usually wake up with a bunch of terrible physical symptoms. So I would have those butterflies in my stomach, my heart would be racing, sometimes I would be sweaty, my thoughts would be racing, and so I would immediately start to try to think about what was making me feel so anxious. Now we have to realize that in many cases, anxiety really is just physical symptoms. So it's not necessarily that we have a situational trigger for this anxiety. We could just be feeling anxious. So a huge mistake that I would always make is, again, racking my brain trying to figure out what was making me anxious, and then I would just kind of assign some kind of situation to the anxiety. So I would decide that I was feeling anxious because of X, Y, or Z. Now that is certainly not necessarily the case, but as soon as we do this, we start to become afraid of that specific situation. So it becomes the problem of the day. So we are going to be continuously thinking about whatever we determined was the cause of our anxiety, even though it probably wasn't. It was just something that we thought of, and it's going to cause us further and further anxiety, and we're going to start to create very scary negative stories about it. So this really became a habit for me where I would experience these awful symptoms, and then I would kind of decide on what was the source of the anxiety. So this is not the way to go. So instead, we want to really think about the fact that anxiety can simply be these physical experiences. They don't necessarily have to be attributed to any specific situation whatsoever. So later on, when I was able to make the realization that anxiety does not have to be because of something, it could simply be that we are having these symptoms of anxiety, it was so freeing, because I realized I did not have to be fearful of anything. I just had to understand that my body was going through something. So I just learned the different techniques that helped me relieve those actual symptoms. Now in other cases, however, there was a specific cause, and I'm sure in your own life you have many situations where there are things that definitely do cause you to be anxious. It's not just a physical symptom, there is definitely a root cause for why you are feeling that way. In these situations, we want to take a look at what we are clearly feeling anxious about and really determine whether or not the anxiety that we are experiencing is truly rational. We want to really challenge our negative thoughts, because we need to think of what kind of story we are telling ourselves about the different situation. We have a lot of control over how we feel depending on how we choose to think about a situation, and unfortunately, when we suffer from anxiety, a lot of times we think about things in the worst possible way. We really catastrophize situations. So we can learn to also really challenge these negative and oftentimes irrational thoughts. And a great way to do this, and I know I say this in many videos, but it is, in my opinion, the most effective way, is by using cognitive behavioral therapy, which is something that you can perform on yourself or with a therapist, of course. So I will link down below a video that explains this step by step, because I truly believe it is one of the most effective methods and truly was something that was life-changing for me and certainly helped me reduce anxiety big time. We also have to learn how to have a positive inner dialogue. So we are so used to telling ourselves these scary stories all the time and terrifying ourselves, when we can instead be uplifting ourselves and truly being a friend to ourselves, literally being a friend to ourselves. So we know that we are really talking to ourselves internally throughout the day, and we can kind of be a secret friend to ourselves. We can tell ourselves, it's okay, we're going to get through this together. I'm with you all day, and together we are going to get through whatever it is we need to get through. I know that sounds crazy, but for me it was very helpful, because I felt like I had this really internal support system, and it's something that I used to kind of help myself get through the day, because I was always giving myself positive affirmations and kind of helping myself reframe what is happening, and always knowing that no matter what happens, I still have myself. No matter what happens in the world, I am still here to take care of myself. And I know that I'm never going to let myself down. So just remember that also, no matter what happens during the day, you are going to get through it. You've gotten through every other single thing you have ever been through. And there's no reason to think that you're not going to get through this. So kind of talking yourself through this and reminding yourself how strong you've been. A lot of times when we have anxiety, we are suffering through things kind of mentally that would be horrific to experience in real life, but we have the physical symptoms, so it's a lot of times almost as bad as if we've really been through these terrible situations. So give yourself credit for that, and again, just kind of have that positive, loving inner dialogue that is going to uplift you and remind you to keep pushing forward, and that the things that we are worried about oftentimes, first of all, never come into fruition, and also could be gotten through if they ever did. I think a lot of times we think anxiety is helpful because it's like we want to mentally prepare ourselves for some kind of difficult or challenging situation, but in reality, we have no idea what is going to happen. So most of the time we are just creating lots and lots of suffering for ourselves because we are experiencing the pain of traumatic situations that most of the time do not happen. And if we think about our lives, think about the terrible things that have happened in your life. These are probably things that you did not expect or predict. So there's no way we can know ahead of time what we should have anxiety for. So really there's no reason to have any anxiety. It does not help us in any way aside of when we are in truly a life-threatening situation, and it is helping us, stay away from something that is dangerous. But that is very infrequent in modern days. Most of the time it's just suffering that we are creating for ourselves. So know that the anxiety that we are experiencing really is not helpful for us, and it is something that we definitely want to try to let go of. It is not preparing us for any future situation. It is only causing suffering. And if your anxiety seems to be more because you are feeling overwhelmed because you have too many things to do, that life is pulling you in too many directions, I'm going to go ahead and link down another video that I specifically did on overwhelm and how we can kind of effectively navigate ourselves through that as well. Because when we are overwhelmed, of course, we're going to feel anxious, but that is something that we can, again, very effectively navigate. So once we've done this kind of internal assessment for what is causing the anxiety, whether it's just a physical symptom, whether it is situational, or whether it's that we are feeling very overwhelmed, we want to go ahead, acknowledge that, and then hop out of bed as soon as possible. Because if we stay in bed, we are going to ruminate over this. We are going to have the same exact thoughts over and over and over. And we know that these are not positive thoughts. These are negative thoughts that are just going to cause further suffering, and they're going to be on repeat. So we are going to just repeatedly have this suffering until we stop thinking about it. And so just physically leaving the bed and possibly the bedroom is the quickest way to kind of shift track. So that's something that I definitely suggest. And I absolutely suggest, if possible, getting outside. I like to go running first thing in the morning. I literally have a glass of water and I am out the door before I do anything else. That shakes off anxiety probably more than anything that I do. It is really impossible to feel anxious when you are running because, your heart is pumping, you are starting to feel energized, and you are kind of taking control of the day. And also I find it really helpful to be outside if you can get outside, even if it's not to exercise, even if it's just to have your coffee, but to feel that fresh air, to get yourself kind of out of your head and just remember that there is this beautiful world out there. I think that's really helpful as well. And that's why I like to combine my exercise with being outdoors. And I love to do it in the morning because it definitely reduces anxiety for me. And one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you is whatever you do, do not check your phone first thing in the morning. The phone is filled with things that can make you anxious. It's a reminder that this world is operating at a relentless pace. It's going to be filled with messages of things that you need to get accomplished that day, and we don't want anyone else to be influencing our day right at the beginning. We need to have time for us before we even think of addressing anything that could be happening on your phone. None of that matters. The morning, especially if you suffer from morning anxiety, needs to be all about you. We need to get into the habit of making the morning a positive time. So we want to think about doing things that we enjoy and that are self-soothing, such as meditating or practicing yoga, writing in a journal, spending time in prayer, taking a hot bath, whatever it is that is soothing and is relaxing for you. These are the types of things that you want to happen in the morning, and you want to make sure that you are getting up on time to do this. You want to give yourself plenty of time. You don't want chaos in the morning. So if that means that you need to wake up at 5 o'clock in order to do this, it's worth it. Believe me, it is worth it. I have a client that wakes up at 4:30 because she has 6 children and she has no time to herself ever. And she consistently wakes up with morning anxiety. So she has learned to create this habit where she wakes up at 4:30, she goes outside, she has her coffee, she writes in her journal, and she just relaxes. And her littlest one is usually up by like 5:15, so that gives her 45 minutes to herself to really get herself in the mental space that she needs to be in. So that's the type of thing that we need to figure out. What are the habits? What are the rituals that are going to contribute to having a more positive morning and for really pushing away anxiety and eliminating any factors that we know ahead of time are going to contribute to having anxiety. And overall, we need to learn to practice mindfulness, that feeling of truly being in the moment, being in the here and now, because where does that anxiety come from? It comes from thinking about past events that we can't control and thinking about future events that we feel that we're not going to be able to handle. So if we can learn to really bring ourselves back to the present moment, think about that moment at hand, that's also really going to help us with that morning anxiety. So if we need to in the morning, if we're feeling all these physical symptoms, we can just kind of close our eyes and think about our other senses. We can think about what we are hearing, what we are smelling, the things that we can touch and feel, and really start to bring ourselves into what is happening now. We can open our eyes and see what are the things that are happening around me at this moment, and remember that the things that are causing us so much suffering are either in the past or the future. So really pulling us back into the present moment by using that technique of mindfulness is going to be really helpful, and that is the final video I will link down below on really how to practice mindfulness if this is really not a concept that you are familiar with. So please remember that you are a strong, capable person that just happens to be experiencing anxiety. It's not a flaw. It's actually very common. More people experience anxiety than you could possibly imagine. And unfortunately, it just has such a negative impact on our life. So it's so important that we do learn to address anxiety and we see what strategies are most effective for us. And know also that if it's something that you feel that you simply can't get through alone, there is help available. You can always seek out a mental health professional that would be more than happy to offer effective therapy for helping you get through anxiety. It is not something that you have to live with forever. This is something that you can learn to overcome and manage, and something that I personally was able to overcome. So that is proof that it is possible. And there are just so many different ways that we can address this, and it's just a matter of finding what works best for us. So if there are strategies that you use to help with your own morning anxiety, please do not hesitate to add them in the comments below. We are all kind of on this journey together. We are all here to uplift and support one another. So if you have any strategies that you would like to share, please don't hesitate to do so. As always, I truly hope you found this video interesting and helpful. And if you did, please like it, share it with someone else who may need to hear the same message today. And also do become a subscriber if you aren't one already. We definitely want you to stay connected. And I thank you so much for spending time with me today. Have an absolutely amazing day.